Welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. I'm Randy Zinn. I'm an entrepreneur, wellness expert, author, and the founder of the Going Beyond movement. I'm constantly exploring how individuals can make the most impact on a daily basis. And here's what I've learned. Your life is part of the change we want to see in the world. Your life is the movement. The work you do is that drop that causes that ripple effect of positivity. Let today's episode be part of your daily contribution toward change, the investment you make in yourself. Let it be the fuel you need to go beyond. I wanted to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor. Empower is your most important back-to-school supply and health supplement. Empower AHCC provides intense immune support for you and your family. With more people going back to school and work in person, you need to protect your health more than ever. Empower's active ingredient boosts not only your immune system, but your energy levels as well, enabling you to better handle life's never-ending to-do list. Order online at theharmonycompany.com and get $15 off your first order with code BEYOND. Offers cannot be combined with any other offer. An offer can only be used once per customer. Thanks, Empower, for sponsoring the Going Beyond podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first interview episode of season 7 on the Going Beyond podcast. I'm so grateful that this podcast has continued to just be such a source of joy and growth for me and for my listeners. I can't really imagine my life without this space. So I'm thrilled to be here. And today's interview is literally the perfect place to begin this next period of sharing amazing content with you all, because in so many ways it's connected to Randy a very long time ago. So I'm going to give a very personal introduction to my guest today, and then I'll do a more formal intro of her. But I'm joined today by Faith Hunter, and Faith was my first yoga instructor many a moons ago. I was a 21-year-old who moved to New York City, like some of us did, and I had my first little apartment in Murray Hill, and I knew that I needed to move my body and I needed to do some breathing because New York was intense. And I found myself at a little yoga studio called mang'Oh Yoga in Murray Hill. And I walked into a yoga class, and unbeknownst to me, my life would be changed. And that is not an exaggeration. Faith has always been a magnificent yoga teacher. She has many more things that we're going to learn more about today. But when Faith became my first yoga teacher, many things opened up. I got in my body in a way that even as someone who had danced for a very long time, I hadn't really made the connections of something that felt so grounded and so about me and not about pleasing other people. I also discovered a deep and unique connection to my physicality and my emotional and spiritual life. I also made a connection between the power of music and that spiritual, physical connection. I discovered community, what it felt like to be in a group of people that love to do that together. Faith was the person that made that happen in this beautiful space in time in New York City many a moons ago. So also another special point is that Faith led me also to the studio that she was trained and that I ultimately became trained as a yoga instructor. So in so many ways, yoga is a gift that Faith gave me, and I feel that way. So this is where Faith and I originally connected, and we have stayed close and supportive and loving of one another for a long ass time. And it's just so special to finally have her with me here on the podcast. It feels so full circle. So before I give like a more formal introduction of Faith, she's here with me. So I'm just going to say, hey, Faith.
Hey, what's up? What's up? I'm over here crying, by the way. I'm just like, I have little tears. I'm like, put them back, put them back, put them back.
Actually, I recorded an episode like earlier today and we cried. So, I mean, crying is welcome here. But I mean, Faith, wasn't that just such a special time?
You know what? Actually wasn't. I was such a new yoga teacher, and that was like one of my first jobs. And yeah, like it was the perfect little loving studio space. Like that's what mang'Oh was. And I just enjoyed like taking the bus because I had to do the crosstown bus in order to get there because I lived on the west side. And so, yeah, and meeting you was a gem because not only have I followed you and all the stuff that you've done, but just I was there when like the little ones were being like born, and like I was part of those little moments that you've had in your life as things have shifted and changed for you as well.
Yeah, like we've shared a lot over the years, and to think it all started in a yoga studio. And I also remember when you left, we'll get into that, but long story short, when you decided to relocate to DC, I think I had a major heartbreak because coming to your class was like it was just such a huge part of my world. And I remember the mix CD I made you.
I know. Oh my God. You know what? So this is really weird. I still have it.
Oh, well,
it's packed away. It's packed in boxes, but I found it at some point during some move. And I was like, oh, this goes in the box that I save things.
Nostalgia box. You're like, I don't have a CD player anymore, but I know. I made that CD with like all the love of all the music and all the flowing and all the stuff that happened in that room with you. Yeah. So, oh my God. Okay. So everybody forgive us for doing felling over here, but let me give you guys just a little bit more about who Faith is so that you can know the presence that you're sharing right now. So Faith began her practice of yoga and meditation in the early 90s, originally as a way to cope with her beloved brother, Michael, who was dying from complications related to AIDS. And I do want to say that Faith and I have always resonated on the connection of losing a beloved family member and how it led us to our yoga practice. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So through mindfulness and personal reflection, Faith was able to release her fears and experience an awakening from within. And from that day forward, she committed herself to sharing these practices with the world. And she has. So I'm going to basically deduce your bio to a couple of important points, which is that Faith has traveled the world. Faith has taught yoga, meditation, and her unique philosophy that she has developed and created called Spiritually Fly, that she's going to share more with us about, of course, around the world at yoga festivals and yoga conferences and at esteemed places like Kripalu and Yogaville. She has been on the cover of many a well-known magazine like Yoga Journal and Origin Magazine and Om Yoga and Lifestyle out of the UK. She's been also on Essence and Washington Post and Women's Health. She's been all over, guys, doing what she does. And in the midst of all of that, she opened a beautiful yoga studio in Washington, D.C. called Embrace Yoga. So Faith has been sharing her passion and her commitment to wellness and to moving toward a life of meaning and flow and breath and spirit since the day I met her. So it's been a joy to watch that growth, and we have so much to talk about and to share today with each other. So yeah, Faith, like this is for me.
I love it. I love it. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me on your podcast.
Yes. So where do we want to start? I mean, should we talk about Spiritually Fly? Should we talk about being all the crazy stuff we're all navigating right now? Like in the
Yeah. I mean, wherever you're feeling pulled to want to know.
Why don't we first, just because some of our listeners are going to be getting to know you for the first, why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you've created and what it is from and what it's really about?
Yeah. So basically, as you mentioned, the philosophy spiritually fly, that is an evolution, and that's something that happened. It's really weird. Happened about 10 years ago. Yeah, sometime around 2010, 2011, so somewhere around 10 years ago or so. And it started to kind of spill from a breakup. I like women in all of our breakups. And so it came out of that. But I soon realized, like years later, that it had nothing to do with that. Spiritually fly for me is something that started when I was a kid. And I didn't realize that until I started to sit down and start writing a book. And I didn't even know why I was writing the book. I just needed to start writing. And it's taken like forever to get it finished, and it's in publication, or it's being published right now. But it was a result of growing up in the South and being around many family members that express their spirituality in different ways. Like my mother and my grandparents, they were both sets of grandparents were very, very steeped in church, and specifically the Baptist and Methodist church. But my father, on the other hand, was just like, no, I hate organized religion. It's all about, being kind, and this is the spiritual essence. But then one of my grandmothers also was all about the earth. And like, she really, like, I saw her spirit shine when I think about like the images and the connections that we had in her garden when I was a little girl. Those were those moments that I was gravitated to feel her way more than when she was like doing her church lady thing. And I realized that all of my elders was being passed down and pushed into me. And I kept wanting to give, right? For me, it's always been like, how can I show up in this world and give? Once I became a yoga teacher, it all clicked. And it was like, there's this level that I want to give. There's this spiritual connection that coming together. And then years and years later, after you and I met, Spiritually Fly happened. And I was like, oh my God, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And then how can I share that message through this new philosophy that's really coming from my soul?
And what does the philosophy say?
Yeah. So basically the philosophy are some of those elements that you shared earlier around music. So sound vibration is key and essential. I grew up in the South, so music was always part of what we do. Like all my siblings and we all played instruments. I was a dancer, so music was always like instrumental in helping me feel. Then there's also within the music that its overall essence of sound current. So understanding that our voices carry this beautiful sound current from even when we're talking and having conversation with people. Tapping into the element of earth, tapping into movement, tapping into our own spiritual connection to source, that's spiritually fly. And so when you take all of those elements, sound, movement, connection to spirit, the aspect of all the energy that's within and around us, and move out into the world in whatever way, how we are showing up, but doing it in a very rooted and grounded path, or in a grounded way so that our path is much more clear. That's kind of spiritually fly. Bringing together those very pure elements that all of us have and finding the source so that we can be better at who we are in this moment in time, regardless of where we are now, the crazy shifts and changes that are happening in the world.
I love it. I mean, obviously it resonates so much for me. How have you expressed this truth for so many years all around the world, so many different people? Like, I can only imagine that the message just continues to innovate itself.
Yes.
Over time, with the more people that you connect with, and people in different countries, and you name it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. Like, as I've traveled and as the years have gone on, things are constantly shifting and evolving, and I'm constantly being inspired. I think part of that inspiration is that I really enjoy being of service. I really enjoy connecting and cultivating and creating community. And I've taken what I've gained while I'm traveling, while I've had my studio, and allowed my students to inspire the work and the way that I offer this spiritually fly message up. And it comes from like a ping in the middle of the night, right? I'm like lying in bed or I'm in the shower and I'm like, oh my God, I need to do this. And even like today, I'm like, oh my God, it's so weird. Today, because I haven't verbalized this to my staff, I'm on my yoga mat and we have yoga teacher training that's happening in about a month. And I know that later this weekend, I'm going to be revamping the manual. And I'm like, we're doing all of this virtual. And I'm like, I'm going to shift the way the manual is going to look anyway. But now I'm going to have these video manuals that are part of the virtual training. So they get their little talk, but then they also have these opportunities to go back and see myself and other teachers in action doing a variety of techniques that they've maybe learned on the weekend. So it's like, that would not have been inspired, like that ping would not have shown up unless we were in this moment in time.
Right.
And so that's taking everything that I've done over the past like 14 years in training yoga teachers and elevated that to a whole nother level.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that so just the universal experience right now, particularly I would say for entrepreneurs, I mean, who have the ability to take what they do and take what they offer and actually respond to the time that we're in, as well as be of service to the needs of people during this time, of which you're doing both. So tell us, I mean, you just kind of started going there, but like, tell us more about all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, there's yoga teacher training that I've been doing for a really long time, but as you mentioned, I own a yoga studio. And so we immediately went into virtual classes mid-March. And then we did a lot of like Zoom and just kind of patching things up and together to figure out how we're going to be of service to our students. Then from that response, we created, like we went into business with another partner to do a platform. That was happening. And then now, 3 months into being on the platform, which only a couple of people know, well, now your viewers will know, I'm going to be, because the shift's going to happen anyway. But I feel like we have to take another shift because our clients need something different than what's being offered on this particular platform. And part of that is understanding what their needs are, responding to them instead of reacting. Because I think that is probably one of the best lessons that people can learn from this experience, is that there's a lot of reacting right now.
Right.
And what I've allowed myself to do is to not react so quickly. Yeah, there's definitely some gut sensations that I need to do this, and put all these little pieces in place. But if there are things that there's time for me to make a decision on, I give myself the pause. I press the pause button, I sit with it, I breathe in it, and then I'm like, okay, what do I need to go? Which direction feels right? And then I respond based upon whatever the need is.
Well, that's the difference between responding more from a gut place than it is from all the frenetic fear that is in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that's a skill, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we can easily go mad. And, I was sharing with you before we started recording is that I'm home alone. So it's like myself and my dog. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking at the news and I'm getting text messages and I'm talking to my family that's all the way in Louisiana. And I could literally go mad in here.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So what is helping you?
I think initially, the first couple of months, I would probably say staying in constant communication with my family and talking to them regularly has really been a major support. And having my mom being able to get and do her little, FaceTime and like seeing her sweet little face has always been a joy. But also my staff that lives here in DC, and particularly my management team. And we've been able to get together at the studio, practice social distancing, and just having conversation and connecting with them. And of course, taking long walks and giving myself time to sleep when I wanted to sleep. And okay, my yoga practice today is going to be all restorative.
I just had a conversation with somebody about this. We were reflecting on the fact that we'll notice that we're more tired right now. We'll notice that we don't have the energy for small talk, that there is a real shift in our energy frequency. And I'm sure you're going to relate to this, Faith, because I immediately said, yeah, that's what it feels like when you're grieving. And what I realized was that we're all collectively actually grieving quite a bit right now. And yes, our bodies, our minds, our systems are constantly calibrating. But how lucky are we to have practices that support that calibration?
Exactly. Yeah, which is, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I look at individuals that I know that are like friends or family member that don't have some type of spiritual practice in their lives, like their shit's really hitting the fan. I mean, like all of ours is kind of like spinning around, but I look at my mom, like her spiritual practice doesn't look like mine, but she still calls in to the Sunday morning Zoom, and she's, wants to listen to her pastor, and she, wakes up and takes her walks and connects with her friends, on some level. Same thing for my brother. He has his family, and he also is very steeped in church. And so he has that, and him and his wife are like beautifully yoked. So it's like they take time for each other, even though they have a 16-year-old son at home. They're like, no, we're going for a walk alone. So whatever your tool is that brings you steadiness and peace, you have to use it right now.
Don't you feel like we started out interviewing when we began the interview, and we were talking about where you came from, and we always mention your beautiful brother, Michael, and my amazing dad, Michael, and how, they're now in spirit, but so with us, and that their loss was like part of what births like our ability to navigate pain and loss and find spirit connection. But don't you find that those skills and that awareness carries through to times like this?
Oh my God. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my. So Randy, I have to, because we're in this interview and I just wanted to be full transparent. As you mentioned that, tomorrow is the anniversary of my brother's death.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And how long has it been?
Oh my God. That was 94.
It's a long time ago, but still like right there.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because there we go. Interviews like barely even there. But yeah, that is a moment in my life that created this massive shift. And it's a moment that just like is still so attached. And I think that's the piece about where we are now as a collective, right? We are experiencing this major essence of grief that we have to go through in order to see the other side. But this is also a moment that 10 years from now, 20 years from now is still going to be with us. And we're going to still have the wounds and the level of trauma that it created in our physical body, in our emotional body. And that's exactly when you lose a loved one, years later, right? You're still feeling that. And it can come up, boom, at any moment in time, like that trigger.
Yeah, I feel you, Faith. In October, it'll be 15 years since 15. And you remember when you were like in my orbit when that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's wild. And it's like everything you've become is hinged on the reality that it did happen. And so many of the gifts of how you've been able to give to others and how you're able to view challenge and moments like this, which never could he have ever imagined this. No, but here we are. And so, wow. So yeah, just I love what you're saying though. We're aware that trauma is happening right now, but it will be in the future that we'll look back on it and be able to be like, oh, that's why I have issues around that.
Right.
whatever that is, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it will turn out to be. Yeah.
Whatever that will be. Yeah. So, I want to also, like, as we're kind of leaning into trauma, but also the opportunities for growth and opening at this time, obviously there has just been so much fusion of pain, but also awakening with so much more in your face awareness of what's been going on for Black individuals in our country. And for those of you who have been hanging out with me, I've been really opening up about these topics, leaning into my own learning very vulnerably on the podcast and otherwise. I was looking forward to leaning into these discussions with Faith because I'm going to reflect back. When I met Faith in, I guess it was 2001, and, you were this young yoga teacher, although I never viewed you as a new yoga teacher, but I was also, God knows what I was doing. I was 21 and I don't know what was happening. But to me, you were always very mature of voice and came from such a soulfulness. So I never saw you as a newbie. But, there literally were very few women of color in the yoga world. I mean, I don't want to say none, but I want to say almost none.
Yes.
And you navigating a journey of owning your full self in such a whitewashed, for lack of a better word, industry was always something that I watched with such admiration. And I remember distinctly when you made it to the cover of Yoga Journal magazine, and I was like, F yes. There was something in that cover that was it was a little bit of a big moment, obviously for you personally, but really more so for what it represented. And I think now, in the face of so much, public intensity and awareness of being an American person of color and all the things that even non-people of color are trying to understand, I think that you would have quite a lot of light to share on the journey that you've been on.
Yeah. It's been really interesting because that was 2010. When it happened. And when I look at my presence on the cover of Yoga Journal in that moment, I think maybe 10 years prior to that, that was another, African-American woman on the cover. That was it. So it only had been two, and they're almost 30 years or so. 10 years later, there still really haven't been that many, although in the past, say, 2 to 3 years, there have been more, maybe 3 or 4 years, there have been more. And even then, with the magazine, I have a love-hate relationship with them. And I know that they are trying to do better, which I really appreciate because I think that they are a presence within the community. Even they've been controversial and they've made really, really bad mistakes. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. They made bad mistakes and decisions and choices. They didn't pause and reflect.
There you go. They missed that part.
They missed that part. They were just let's just do it now, right? And so, but anyway, it's been really fascinating. And I think that my path and my journey would not have happened if I hadn't have left New York and moved to DC. Because living in New York, yeah, I was one of very few Black yoga teachers, but I still saw other Black yoga teachers. And that came from a variety of backgrounds, that taught in the studio where I was teaching, that taught throughout the city. And I didn't see myself as fully being alone in the realm of being a yoga teacher and a woman of color. Moving to DC was what?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I'm in Chocolate City.
Right.
That's what they used to call it back in the day, right? And so I was this is not making sense to me. And even when I was teaching, I started teaching in a studio here when I first moved, it was still just really odd. I was the only woman of color. Forget about being Black, just any brown shade of color. I was the only one teaching at that studio. There were a couple of students that would show up because I think they probably saw a photo or something on the website. And then I finally connected with another woman that was a yoga teacher, but she came from the West Coast and had moved to DC. And so her and I partnered up. We opened up our first studio. But that inspiration was the result of us not or for me, not being able to teach the way I wanted to teach and having to conform, and everything conforming to the music, conforming to the words and the language that I was using. It needed to fit in a box. And I was like, but this isn't how I teach. And this is not what I'm feeling from my soul. And as a result, I opened up that studio, and then now I have a second one. But the entire time that I've been on this journey post the Yoga Journal cover has been really interesting, because I've had major highlights, and I've been the first for a variety of reasons in different platforms. And for, they just needed a Black woman. So I showed up, and I was like, my mom would always say, girl, take advantage of that opportunity. And so I was like, okay, because I need to get paid too. I mean, I need to make a living, because I wanted to do this full time. And so I took those opportunities, and they were great. Some of them I've made really, really bad choices and mistakes, specifically when it came to contracts. And because of that, I decided that I needed to have a manager early on, because my first 2 years, myself and my partner at the time, him and I were doing the best. And we were both in this arena that we didn't know what we were doing. And that's when I decided that, okay, maybe I need a manager. So I got a manager. And then even having a manager, and she's a Black and Mexican woman, she's a woman of color. She would get pushback on contract negotiations. And she's like, wait a minute, I have other clients with you to be paid the same amount. She deserves the same service and benefits that you're providing these other yoga teachers around the country. I mean, and globally. And speaking of global, and so that was a struggle, but speaking of globally, I started traveling internationally, because that's where I was getting most of my gigs.
Yeah.
And it really saddened me, because I'm sitting right here in Washington, D.C., and I couldn't get a gig in Maryland to save my life. I could get something in New York, or I could be on the West Coast, in Seattle, California, anything middle of the country in the South. No, the only way I was getting things in the South is if my brother set it up, or some other relative had a hookup, and they were like, they're looking for a yoga teacher, or we recommended you for this. That was the only reason. But everything was coming in from Europe and Asia. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to go and start teaching abroad. And that opened up so many opportunities. And those are really, really good choices. But even with that, it was still, the color of my skin was still a barrier. And there were many, many times where I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I had 1,000,001 doubts. Like, pull out of this whole thing. Forget this wellness industry. It's worse than being working at a record label.
Right.
Because I worked at EMI Records for a little while, and when I was in New York, like for a hot second, and that was a crazy environment. But being in the yoga industry was just as crazy.
Wow. And that's just a moment to reflect, because people put so much weight on almost like the righteousness of the wellness world, right? And that's deep. It makes me think, like, I've watched a lot of documentaries about artists and musicians over the course of like the past century, and notice how many have traveled over to Europe to find a place to express themselves in a more free space.
Yeah. And I think as a result, then finally, even though I was still living here in the US, then finally people were seeing what was happening in Europe and the level of respect that I was receiving, specifically in Germany. I mean, I felt like I was in Germany all the time. Then they were like, oh, okay, she's still of value. Because it was like, poof, Yoga Journal cover. And then there were a couple of little things that were happening as a result, but I wasn't getting the same level and opportunities that other cover models were receiving. And so then finally, when I started to receive respect almost 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago in the US, then things started to shift a little bit. But I mean, I always say, I've made my bread and buttered my bread in Europe.
Wow. And so what would be your blanket statement about that, Faith, about what the truth is over here?
You know what? I know why people are tired, because I'm tired. I know why people forget about, we've always marched and we've always protested, right, for various reasons. But I understand why people have rioted. I understand why, there are places where, things, especially in Minneapolis, where, the burning and I get it. I know where people have looted because they're tired. And there are days in quarantine where I'm like, if I didn't create and constantly push over the past 10 years, I would be shit out of luck because my studio is struggling. I mean, like all yoga studios, but the saving grace is that I've pushed and stayed in this for like consistent post yoga journal for 10 years.
Yes, you have, my friend. I need a breath on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me as like one of your earliest students and your longtime friend, like just makes me angry, but I know it's the truth and I'm glad you're saying it. I'm glad other people are saying it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can't be angry. I mean, I can't be angry that this stuff is happening that's happened in the yoga industry.
Yeah.
Because it's just a reflection of the United States and how we've handled people of color and even layered on top of that women, from the beginning of time, from the creation of this country.
Yes.
And it's just shifted and it's taken on another form. But racism is racism, however you see it. However it happens, it is present.
Yes, it's so true. And I think the job now from a collective awareness is that like that truth has to start becoming like truth for everybody. I mean, we're not there yet, but I think it's starting to open up. So yeah, we have to just keep telling these stories, Faith. Yeah. So I'm glad that you are.
Yeah. Because I think that probably one of my greatest fears is that a year from now, post-election, whatever that looks like, that people are going to get quiet again.
You're not the only one that has said that to me. A lot of people share that same fear, which is why like it's just up to anyone, myself, you, and many other people who have platforms, who have voices to use them and use them continually because we can't let that happen.
No.
But yes, we are at risk for that.
Yeah.
Because it's happened before.
It's happened before.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think about all the work that happened in the 60s, like all of that work.
Yeah.
And then it's like, poof. Yeah, we've made it. And then all of a sudden, a couple of little steps. And then, like you said, poof.
Yeah. So I think it's really important. Also, Faith, you've made this statement to me before, and I just want to like make room for it. You're like, everyone knows me as a yoga teacher and I know I'm good at it, but I'm so many things. And I just want to give you the chance to express those other parts, those other pieces.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm in this yoga realm and like you said, I have said before, I'm good. I'm like, I think part of what makes me good as a yoga and meditation instructor is the energetics. And I've always been a reader of energy. I really believe that I get that from my elders and my grandparents and my ancestors. That just is part of who I am. But the other aspect that I am is that I'm really this crazy, insane creative being. And I love creating in all its forms. I mean, many people know I love writing poetry, and there's like sometimes only 2 lines. Sometimes it's 1 line. Sometimes it's like multiple, right? It's the whole soliloquy or something like that. But it's like that is the writing and using language and the play on words in the written form is so joyous to me. And it hasn't always been, because when I was growing up as a kid, I like hated words and I hated reading. And I was introduced to one of my mom's close friends when I was probably like about 12 or 13. And at the time, my mom got really, really sick. She had some bacteria that entered her bloodstream, and so she was really sick. And so her friend was the one that would do my hair. So she would like every week come and like, straighten my hair, put it up in little ties and, blah, blah, blah. But she was an English teacher. And so during that time, because my mom was really sick, my grades were like tanking, of course. And so they were mostly tanking in English. And so she started tutoring me when she would do my hair. And she gave me a copy of The Prophet. I still have the exact same copy. And I pull it out from time to time because it's this beautiful reminder that words come from the soul. And when you string them together, they create emotion and have the power to transform people. And so, and create change. I mean, because that's what we need right now. And so I love being able to string words together and allowing that to be kind of my canvas. So the human emotion is my canvas, and I'm just like painting these words across them. The other aspect that I love creating in is like actually being behind the scenes. And I love directing video. I love directing, photo sets. Like I'm always trying to get my yoga teachers to come and take photos and shoot video. And I'm like, come on guys, let's do it. And I think part of it is just so that I can like be the director and like, cause I have this vision in my head of like how I want things to be and, look and feel. And yeah, so that's like another way that I love creating. And then, the final piece, which I never thought I would find joy in, is in quarantine, I'm actually cooking.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't really that big into cooking, even though I was from Louisiana. But being in quarantine, I'm like experimenting. And I was like, I like food, but I mean, I've always loved eating it, but I'm like, I like how it looks on my plate. And there's like this pure satisfaction of creating this meal for myself and nourishing my body in this time that I need it more than anything.
Totally. I really resonate with that and everything that you shared. I get it. And I love that you have all of that. And I can't wait for that book to finally come out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm all about that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, so the title of the book, I'll just blast it out because it's coming. It's Spiritually Fly, Wisdom, Meditation, and Yoga to Elevate the Soul. And there's so many gems, but, when I connected with the publisher, they wanted my poetry because that's what they saw on my Instagram feed. And they were like, we want some of these words in there and we want you to thread things together and blend it in that way. And so, yeah, it's like every single chapter has like one of my poems.
Gosh.
And then throughout there's like these little quotes that I pulled from like other sources. So even in that creative energy of bringing that book together, I was able to just look back on everything I'd written over the past couple of years and go, holy cow. That's a lot of stuff, Faith. And then pulling everything out of my head and my heart and putting it all on paper. It's amazing.
It's totally you. It's totally like having all of you seen in this, for all of that to be present.
Yeah. And I think that was the most important piece, is that I wanted people to see all of me and not just one dimension. Because we all, this is not just for me, I think that we all are really, really, really good at something. And then that's how people see us. And they put us in that box because that's where they see us safely. And then if we start to venture out of that box, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I had to take that moment where I was like, you know what? I really don't care. Because this is how I show up when I teach. So now I need to show up in the world with all of me. Here it is. This is me. Take it or leave it. This is what I have to say. And some of it's going to probably hurt your feelings. Like, I think that probably the biggest piece that's going to be kind of shocking is that I reference the Bible throughout the book. Like, and specifically, there's one particular section where I just pull apart a biblical verse. And I'm like, this is not what it means for me. And I'm like, ooh, Faith. I was like, oh my God, you're moving out of that Christianity lane. Get it, girl. But it was fun just to even claim that.
Yes. And this is what is necessary right now. Faith, I love you.
I love you, Randy.
This is amazing. Like, this whole journey is just very special. It's obviously also very personal to me. And I'm just so grateful that we spent this time together. It's unbelievable. Before we go, though, please tell everyone where to find you, where they can be part of your classes, where they can follow your journey, where they can know about this book, everything.
Yeah. So, of course, everything about me is at faithhunter.com. If some people are just on social media and they're like, I'm not going to a website, you can always find me on Instagram at spiritually fly. In terms of practicing with me, I have a new platform. So we created a shift at my studio. Things aren't streaming as part of the studio. I created a whole new brand that started prior to COVID. And then once COVID hit, I was like, well, I guess we're launching the brand. And so the new brand is Embrace Om. And yeah, it's a sister brand to the yoga studio, and all of our live streaming, all of our on-demand classes, all of our blogs and podcasts and all kinds of random things are on Embrace Om. And we have Embrace Om TV.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't know about it, but I'm going to check it out now myself.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So Faith, thank you for being everything you are and for sharing your story and your truth. I love you. Again, that's it.
Love you.
That's all we need to know. Thank you so much for spending time and for hanging out with me again for season 7 as it gets rolling. And please, if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, when you subscribe, you won't miss an episode, and we don't want you to. So thank you for spending time here with me today, and I will see you next time. Bye.